Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most credible voice in true crime. In episode 4 of 2 years ago today CW, the ongoing series just relating the chronological timeline, we go to the 19th of June 2018, and it's just a simple message sent at 10 minutes past 10 in the morning from Watts to Anthony Brown saying, I have to check out by 2 today for a doctor appointment. If anything comes up late in the day, I will let you know. And that's it. And, I suppose after 36 seconds, I could sort of close up shop and see you guys again on June 22nd, which is the next entry into the phone data review. This is actually on page 2082 of the discovery if you want to go and have a look. So, yeah, I mean, one could just sort of say, well, that is what said and that's it. But there are other ways of sort of contextualizing this and sort of digging a little bit deeper. One of the ways is looking at, for example, Shanann's timeline of her Facebook, something we can't really do anymore, but obviously if one did the work then, in 2018, then we had this kind of information, and I did. So I wrote a blog on when was it? I think it was October 23rd. How the hailstorm of June 18th. That's the day before this particular text from Watts to Anthony Brown. It's the day before that there's a huge hailstorm. And so on October 23rd, 2018, so essentially 2-3 months after Watt sent this text, I wrote this post on Crime Rocket. But and there are actually huge hailstones in Shanann's hands that she actually took a photo of. And she talks about, and Frankie Rusek talks about, thank God you have a garage. And the thing that I want to refer you to isn't necessarily that particular post. It's the one from June 19. Because on June 19 there was another hailstorm. So if you look at the date of the post, Chris Watts, 7 Easter eggs on Tornado Day, that is from October 22nd, that's the day before I wrote the blog post referring to the day before in terms of the timeline. In other words, June 18, right? So I wrote about June 19 on October 22nd, and the next day I wrote about June 18 as well. And obviously I was doing research at the time, and I realized the significance of these 2 days, that they were pretty significant. And I'm not going to go through both blog posts. I will put the links to those in the description. But Shanann on June 19, and there's a screen grab from her Facebook where she says, Chris is hiding in the field from tornadoes and will miss the first ultrasound. And then she's got sort of a crying face, and then she says, bringing Bella in his place. She's excited. So you kind of have this strange situation here where for the first ultrasound on June 19, Chris can't make it. And he can't make it because a storm is brewing. And, if you look at the message he sends Anthony Brown, it's not as though Watts wasn't going to go or he was making excuses. I mean, he specifically arranged with Tony Brown that he's going to need to check out for a doctor appointment at 2. That's what he says. And what happened? There was another storm. So there were storms like back to back. And this particular storm wasn't just a thunderstorm like the day before. It was actually a twister. And Shanann, I think Chris Watts actually sent Shanann a photo of this twister from kind of a distance out into the field. I've been looking for it. I can't find it. I have it somewhere. I just can't find the actual image. Um, and it's sort of beyond the scope of these particular videos to get all the information, but some of you might remember it from memory. It's just where he's out on the oil field. I think you can sort of see a dirt road, and then in the distance you see the tornado. So he wasn't making up excuses. It was just something that was happening. But if you think about the symbolism of this storm in nature is literally brewing and is preventing him from going to see the development of his firstborn son, right? And it's kind of an analogy for what was going to happen. There was a real storm. There was a real meteorological storm happening, but there was also a real storm brewing in their marriage. There was a storm brewing in terms of their financial situation. There was a storm brewing in Watts's heart and his mind that would end in Shanann's death, and also the death of Bella, and also the death of this sort of burgeoning life form. So the symbolism is quite stark, isn't it? There's quite a lot to talk about. As I say, you can refer to the 2 blog posts. Something that I noticed, and I think I was criticized quite heavily. I don't sort of sit here and sort of go, well, I'm going to point a finger at this person, or I'm going to point a finger at that person, or I'm on this person's side. All I'm doing is I'm looking at one case, kind of through the lens of experience, having written almost 100 books on many high profile cases, and things stand out. And it's not a matter of choosing sides as trying to understand the criminal mind and how that criminality brews and how it develops, right? So with that little brief perspective, something that just sort of sparked in my mind when this happened was the images of these hailstones. And Shanann actually took a video, and you can actually watch the video if you go to the blog post. She actually took a video of the hail sort of hitting the driveway. You can actually see the hail starting to fall. And I don't know where Chris was when this happened, but his truck is parked in front on the 18th. I don't know whether Chris had taken another vehicle, whether he was somewhere else, but the thing that just struck me, because I've been in that situation myself, we also get big hailstorms where I am, is kind of a thing where you are somewhere else and you've left your car outside and it's starting to hail, and someone is at your home, and do they then let your car get sort of smashed in by hailstones? Right? And we know that Shanann's car, I don't know if it was technically her car, but we know that the car that Shanann used had its little house in the garage, and that's exactly what Frankie Rusick said. Thank God that you've got a garage. Well, Chris Watts also had a garage, he just didn't have the use of it. And then one wonders, did Shanann not think, well, shouldn't I sort of pull Chris Watts' truck into the garage? And I think at that stage I understood the truck to be his personal truck, his sort of work truck. And we later found out, bear in mind when this blog post was written, it was about a month before the discovery actually came out, so we didn't know that for a fact. But anyway, so for me there was just this sort of thought of, how would Chris Watts feel if he sort of, I don't know, came out the shower or returned from the mall, or I don't know, wherever he was, and found his truck really badly damaged in a storm, and meanwhile Shanann had actually filmed it being struck by hail. Right? How would he feel? And like, my thought was he would probably be quite upset. On the other hand, knowing that what we know now, that it was a work truck, he might say, it's the work will pay for it, it's insured by work, it's the responsibility of, it's not really his responsibility in terms of that. It's a work vehicle, no big deal. Who cares? I don't know if I don't know. I think people tend to be quite sort of worried about damage to their vehicles. It tends to be, regardless of who pays for it, it tends to be quite a lot of schlep repairing, a hail damaged vehicle. And interestingly, Nicole Atkinson also spoke about her vehicle being damaged during that very same storm. And I asked her about it directly on Facebook. And bear in mind, just a few days later, like literally 2 or 3 days later, they all went to San Diego and they had that sort of Thrive spiel on the top of the building where Shanann announced that Nicole had won the auto bonus, and Nicole later said, "That's great because my car's been damaged. I could do with a new car." And then the interesting thing is she never got a new car despite that spiel, right? So what I've done in these 10, 11 minutes is just sort of weave together, knit together one seemingly random little snippet of information from that text, and then weave it into Shanann's Facebook fabric, and from there into other things. And as I say, you can actually go to that day, watch the video, look at the hail, look at the truck getting hailed on, and think, well, what do you think about that? Whose responsibility is it? Should Shanann have done something? Should someone's wife do something? On the other hand, you could say, where the hell was Chris? Like, what was he doing? Right? Bear in mind the video where it is hailing on the truck is from, I think, the 18th. So on the 19th, he actually couldn't make it to Frederick. He was kind of like trapped in a field. The other thing that I want to bring up, which is not necessarily scientific, it's just something that I noticed while I was sort of doing a little bit of background research for this particular video, was if you think about some images of hurricanes and like satellite photos of hurricanes, and you look at the image of the ultrasound of baby Nico, it kind of looks similar. It's kind of like the same sort of maelstrom of almost like cirrusy blurs, right? The difference is the one storm is a dynamic system and the other is an organism. It's a new life coming into being. And I think I want to leave you on this particular point. I think a really interesting question is, could things have turned out differently if Chris attended that ultrasound? And what I mean is, if Watts was, he took off work, if he was able to actually get there and then have this moment of beginning, this moment of sort of conception, this moment of connection to his wife, to this newborn creation, in the sense that, okay, bear in mind this is a week after those emails to Nicole Kessinger. Maybe he would have kind of had a change of heart where he felt just feelings of affiliation and feelings of attachment and feelings of responsibility and feelings of love and whatever, care, paternal feelings registering with him, that, you know what, I need to grow up and I need to own this and I need to be a father and I want to be a father and this is exciting and I love my wife and I love my life and whatever. Could that have happened? And instead the storm intervened, and that was in a way the first slight tear where Chris Watts was sort of prevented from attending this little thing, and so he's already separated slightly from his wife and Bella and kind of what's going on. He's at work and there's a storm between them and she's on the other side, and what happened after that? That tear just it sort of tore more, right? It was a small little tear in the fabric, and the tear just sort of got got more and more and more. You know, it was like this, and then eventually it was right. Now, narratively, I think that's interesting, but I think in a realistic way, I think that tear had been kind of developing for some time. I think that tear was already in the process of happening before June, so in May, and then possibly in April as well, and who knows before that. You know, where does discontent start, and when is it there for long enough that, you know, it creates a situation? So in terms of discontent, I want to share an unusual little snippet of political information with you guys. I don't like to do it because it's divisive and everyone has a different view and so on, but I want to be authentic as well, and our president, the South African president, has just sort of reached out to South African whites. White people are the minority in South Africa, so probably for every 8 black people in South Africa, there's like 1 white person, right? And for the last 20 years, white people have been blamed for pretty much everything in South Africa. It's sort of anything that doesn't work, it's apartheid's fault. Even when it's clearly somebody else's fault, when someone's stolen money or whatever, it's just this endless thing, this endless gripe against white people. And that's why I say, you know, at what point, when you blame someone, point the finger at someone, whatever, at what point does that person kind of tune out? And then when you sort of need them and want them, and you sort of come to them and you say, well, why can't we just get along? You know, why don't we just stay together and try and work this out? And then you say, at what point did all of that, all the hurtful comments and blaming and ugliness, at what point did that create a schism or a tear that was sort of unrecoverable? You know, where because my feeling is, I no longer want to live in South Africa. If I can get out, I will. I'm kind of trying to make plans to do that. I have I do not want to invest in South Africa, right? So this whole call to do that for me is falling on deaf ears, because we've been blamed and treated so crap. Everything is the fault of a white person. And what do they call it? You're the whipping boy. And when that happens, and then you come later on and let's be nice. How can you be nice when that ugliness is ringing in your ears? You know what I'm saying? And so I think the same thing sort of applies with sort of a marriage, where at some point reconciliation, you pass that point. It doesn't matter how nice someone is to you, you checked out. You checked out of the marriage. And I'm not saying Shanann was horrible to Watts. Watts may have checked out for another reason. I'm just saying, what are the roots of discontent? Where do they start? And the answer is they do start somewhere. And sometimes it's invisible. You don't sort of wake up one day and realize, I've had enough of this. Sometimes you do. But you don't necessarily wake up and realize and consciously say, I've now reached the point where if you reach out to me, I'm not going to respond. And that is quite a scary thing with human nature, is you can, some people, you can sort of push them, and that they look like they're still under your control. They look like they're still friendly. They look like they're still going along happily with what you want, but actually they're not. Actually, they are looking for the exit. They are looking to go and live there happily ever after somewhere else. And that's kind of what Chris Watts was doing. He was looking for the exit. He was looking to build a beautiful life with someone else. And so I think an interesting question is, how did Chris feel when he missed this ultrasound? Did he feel relieved? Did he feel conflicted? Did he feel like, I should feel bad about missing it, but I actually feel I don't feel anything. I don't feel any, I should feel like this was an important moment, but I don't really feel that way. And if you look at the words he uses to Tony Brown, he says, I have to check out by 2 today for a doctor appointment. He says nothing about a baby. He says nothing about that he's excited. If you compare Shanann's sort of upbeat statement with the exclamation mark and excited and all that, he doesn't say anything about that. He doesn't say, he doesn't mention Shanann. He doesn't mention that it's his child, anything like that. In the previous episode, I referred a little bit to Anthony Brown on page 756 of the Discovery. I spoke a little bit about him getting this vibe from Watts that he wanted to give his child away, and that he wasn't very excited about it. So that's not this impression one has even from the text isn't grasping at straws. It is based on what even Anthony Brown thought. If we scroll a little bit further up, it's really interesting what Anthony Brown says about everything. He says on Monday, August 13, the day that all the bodies were buried and disposed of, he says he arrived at the Anadarko office in Platteville at about 6:10. That's probably the time Watts should have arrived there. That's probably the time all the operators arrived. It's also probably the time Kissinger arrived, right? And so the time Watts left home is also kind of, well, shouldn't he have arrived at work, at his office at 6:10? And I think the answer is yes, he should have, except he didn't go that way. So from the perspective of the neighbors, he may have left at close to the normal time, except he just didn't go to his office. But they wouldn't know, right? His neighbors wouldn't know. Anyway, Brown says he went to the break room and then to Luke Eppel's office. Now, Luke Eppel is kind of their supervisor. Brown said at some point he overheard part of a conversation that Chad McNeil was having with someone on the phone. Brown said he later learned that McNeil was speaking to Watts. Brown said he heard McNeil talking to Watts about Watts going directly to the field first thing in the morning instead of coming to the office. Brown said he thought that was very unusual because Watts came to the office first before going out into the field. So this was very unusual behavior. But I think Watts was trying to fool the non-oil workers community. In other words, he was trying to fool Shanann's Facebook pals, Nicole Atkinson. They didn't know what he did in the field. If it seemed a bit strange what he was doing to his colleagues, well, it was okay because they were kind of a cohesive group and they kept to themselves, and maybe they kept their behavior, maybe they kept their behavior in terms of their work habits somewhat off the record, if that makes sense. So maybe he thought if he did that, it wouldn't easily become public knowledge. Anyway, he goes on to say, Brown said he thought that was very unusual because Watts always came to the office first before going out into the field. That also speaks about premeditation, that Watts thought, wow, putting these bodies at that remote well site will be perfect, and also putting them in the wells will be perfect as well. And you're so caught up in the idea that he wanted to do it as soon as possible, like first thing, when he would have exclusive access to the... And one can imagine Watts sort of thinking about it constantly, and that being his idea. And then Brown said he could never ever remember a time. Let me emphasize that. Brown said he could never ever remember a time when Watts went straight to the field and didn't come to the office first thing in the morning. So Watts was taking some pretty huge gambles, and again, you say, why? Well, because he was in love. He sort of lost his mind. Maybe he's lost his heart as well, in a way. He was addicted. He was like someone on drugs. You're not thinking straight. Brown said the first time he heard anything happening to Watts' family was on Tuesday. So that's actually quite interesting that there wasn't rumors like, the cops called Watts and Watts was going home, because Watts did have to tell his supervisor where he was going. So clearly that was sort of kept under wraps for a little while from everybody else. And it's possible that Kissinger didn't hear about it either from work, for the same reason Brown didn't. I'm just saying it's possible. Whether it's likely is a different story. It's also possible Kissinger was called in that day when the cogs started turning in Anadarko. I'm just saying also that's possible. I don't know how quickly, Luke Eppel could easily have, gotten the call that the police were calling, and then just being very careful, and then made a call to somebody, which led to them figuring things out really, really early. We just don't know that. We just don't know if that was the response. What we do know is by Tuesday, before Watts even came into the, I'm not quite sure of the timeline, but anyway, very, very early, I think Tuesday night, Anadarko was already providing the CBI with stuff that they were kind of asking for, like, I think GPS data and emails and I think browser histories and stuff like that. So Anadarko were on the ball really early on. Anyway, Brown said he and McCoy went to a location to turn on the well when McCoy said something to him about Watts' family had gone missing. This is on Tuesday. Brown thought this was at about 8 a.m. and they were at the Roland Arndt 284 location. Brown said McCoy told him that Watts was getting ready to do an interview on the television about his family missing. Brown said he immediately reactivated his Facebook account. And I think that's so interesting, is the fact that you have quite a few people deleting their Facebook or not having Facebook in the story. You have Watts who's deleted his Facebook account. You've got Kissinger who isn't on Facebook. I think she was at a certain point. And he has Brown reactivating his Facebook. And then you say, well, why? Like, why was it dormant? And he said, well, he thought it was a waste of time, but also, I think he was getting he was friends with Chris Watts, and he was getting a lot of Thrive crap on his timeline, and I don't think that was making his day. It was almost like spam, and so he just didn't want it anymore. That may have been part of it. There may have been other things as well. Anyway, he says he started posting started posting the stories he could find about the Watts family and asking everyone he knew to be on the lookout for them. So what Brown is actually doing is he's taking it upon himself to use Facebook to kind of spread the word, to help his colleague, to kind of say, have you seen my friend's wife and kids? And it's kind of what Nicole Atkinson was doing for Shanann, Brown was doing on Watts' behalf. And then one wonders, wouldn't that information have filtered through to Kissinger? Of course, this only happened on Tuesday, though, right? So it was kind of late that it was really cottoning on to the Anadarko staff and crew people. Anyway, he goes on to say, Brown said he and McCoy talked about the situation, and McCoy told Brown that Watts had been having issues with Shanann, and Watts had been sleeping on the couch recently. Brown said he was not aware of any issues Watts was having in his marriage. So you've got one colleague that knows about issues and another one that doesn't. But I mean, the question is, when you've got issues in your marriage, does that mean you to blame or the other person's causing the issues? So it's not necessarily what's letting on that there were issues wasn't necessarily him alerting them to him. It may have been a subtle way of kind of preparing them for Shanann's departure, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're at the half-hour mark. I'm not going to take it further than that. What I can tell you is if you are finding your cable expensive or newspaper subscription expensive, consider joining the True Crime Rocket Science Patreon channel. Yesterday and today I've posted another additional episodes in the ongoing series on the Kissinger tapes and the Watts tapes. I think the Kissinger tapes were up to episode 14, the Watts tapes were up to episode 6, I think. And so if you want some really interesting analysis that's right up your street, you can get quite a lot for just $1 a month. So consider joining. My patrons are a really nice group of people, really informed, and I feel privileged that last month was sort of a record number of patrons, and this month that record was broken. So under these circumstances, it's actually quite incredible, and I'm very grateful for that. So if you want to join the group, feel free to try it out. As I say, $1 a month, and you can get quite a lot of content there. Already over 180 posts on Chris Watts, and I think on the Chris Watts playlist on YouTube, which is free, I think there's almost 120 or so. So there's quite a lot of content that's available if you're still interested in Chris Watts. Bear in mind the John Glatt book should be coming out in July, so about a month from now. I'll also be posting the third book in the Two-Face series, Two-Face, Two Pollyannas, on the $5 tier. There are quite a few audiobooks on there as well. I'll be starting that up from tomorrow. So I'll be putting up sort of one chapter a day or every second or third day. And then eventually I'll put up a link to all of the chapters. So you can either get the audiobook as it goes up, or wait till the whole thing's up and then get it in one go. It's up to you. Right, and that's it. I'll be back in 3 days on the 22nd of June for the next episode in hashtag 2 years ago today CW. If you're interested in that, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, like, share, and I'll see you guys next time.